Section 13 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Leinhart. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers, by James McCosh. Book 2nd, The Reproductive or Representative Power, The Association of Ideas, Part 1. To the superficial observer, it might seem as if these ever-changing thoughts and feelings of ours follow each other at random. In certain of our moods, they leap from topic to topic, certainly with extraordinary rapidity, and seemingly without any order or connection. We would direct them exclusively to some all-important matter, and suddenly they are among objects widely removed and altogether irrelevant. In the midst of business, they set off in pursuit of pleasure. When we would compose our minds for devotion, we find, before we are aware, that they are carrying us wandering over the mountains of vanity, while it will sometimes happen that, in our moments of frivolity and folly, the most solemn thoughts will present themselves to sober or to awe us. Our experience thus seems, at least at first sight, to show that our ideas flit, at their pleasure, from gay to grave, and from grave to gay, from home to the ends of the earth, and from the ends of the earth back to home, from fear to hope, and from elevation down to flatness, from earth to heaven, and alas, from heaven to earth. But while this may be our first impression, it will be found, if we inquire more carefully, that just as law rules everywhere in the world of matter over even the most unruly agents, over the boiling waves, the leaping streams, the fickle winds, so it also reigns with all its order and beneficence in this kingdom of mind, and links, often by invisible ties, our thoughts and emotions one to another. We find our ideas pursuing a course. When we watch and follow them, we find them connected one with another. Someone refers to the great Civil War in America, and immediately its scenes come before us, the circumstances which led to it, the existence of slavery, the feelings of the North and of the South, the battles and their results, the terrible sufferings and the mistakes committed, the conduct of the statesmen and the generals, the part taken by Great Britain and France, the sentiments of these countries about America, the effect which this had on America, the issue of the war and the condition in which it left the United States. Our thoughts have gone over a considerably wide course, over a number of years, and two wide continents, but they have not taken a violent leap. They have trod the whole way, step by step. 2. We can often trace them backward when we find the same consecutiveness. Often, indeed, we may not be able to discover all the links, as some of them may be forgotten in the rapidity of their occurrence. Ordinary conversation often seems very desultory, yet we can at times discover the thread on which are strung topics the most remote and discordant. Thus Hobbes of Malmesbury tells of his being in a company in which the conversation turned on the civil wars in the times of the Commonwealth, when a person asked abruptly, "What is the value of a Roman denarius?" On a little reflection, says Hobbes, I was able to trace the train of thought which suggested the question, for the original subject of discourse naturally introduced the history of the king and the treachery of those who surrendered his person to his enemies. This again introduced the history of Judas Iscariot and the sum of money which he received for his reward. I remember trying to make a company merry by the narrative of a fishing excursion which had been distinguished by some laughable misfortunes, of boastings ending in humiliations, and of duckings without drowning, when to my surprise a lady burst into tears. It turned out that she had lost a dear boy who had fallen into a deep pool when fishing. In such cases we can detect the train of thought. In others we may not be able to follow the path, as no traces have been left behind in the memory. Yet even in such we are certain that there has been a continuous course, just as we are sure that the bullet, though we have not seen it, has passed through the whole intermediate space between the rifle and the target. and that the lightning, which cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, has passed through every point between. Who shall say, whence are those thoughts, and whither tends their way? The sudden images of vanished things, that o'er the spirit flash we know not why. Tones from some broken harp's deserted strings, warm sunset hues of summers long gone by. A rippling wave, the dashing of an oar, a flower scent floating past our parents' door, a word scarce noted in its hour perchance, yet back returning with a plaintive tone, a smile, a sunny or a mournful glance, full of sweet meanings now from this world flown. Are not these mysteries when to life they start, and press vain tears in gushes from the heart? I am to endeavor to say whence are these thoughts. In doing so, I find it expedient first to announce and illustrate the laws which are obvious and which are generally acknowledged, and then to discuss some more subtle and disputed points. The laws of association are of two sorts, primary and secondary. Section 1. Primary laws. These regulate the succession of all our spontaneous ideas, not, however, of all our mental states, some of which, such as our sensations and perceptions, are called up by external circumstances. The laws may be arranged under two heads, contiguity and correlation. 1. Contiguity. When two or more ideas have been in the mind together, on one coming up it is apt to be followed by the other or others. The law takes two forms, the one that of succession, when the ideas have followed each other, the other that of coexistence, when they have been together. 1. In parentheses, the law of succession, when two ideas have immediately succeeded each other, on one of them coming up there is a tendency in the other to follow. This is the law of repetition. The same follows the same. Our thoughts have gone once, twice, or several times in a train, A, B, C, D, E. One of them, A, is started, and off goes the mind after B, C, D, E. Quote, John Gilpin was a citizen of credit and renown. End quote. The child goes over this once, twice, thrice, till the words have been associated according to the law of repetition, and now you have only to start John Gilpin, and away he slides, as on an icy track which he has made on the snow. Quote, was a citizen of credit and renown. End quote. Thus it is that things having been associated once, twice, or often in our minds, the one is apt to recall the other. It is thus we have joined China and tea, Japan and lacquering, Cornwall and tin, Manchester and cotton, Belfast and linen, Switzerland with high mountains and glaciers, the highlands of Scotland with hills, brown heath, rugged rocks, and leaping streams, Ireland with green grass and foliage, ancient Athens with literature, ancient Rome with conquest. Thus it is that, having often seen them together, the black coat becomes associated with a clergyman, the red coat with a soldier in England, and the blue coat with a soldier in America. Thus it is that the sign becomes associated with the thing signified, the rose with England, the shamrock with Ireland, and the thistle with Scotland. Thus it is, and is far more important, that when we have become familiar with the meaning of a word, it at once, and without an effort, calls up the signification, and in an hour we comprehend all that is in the lecture with, perhaps, its 5,000 words. Thus it is that places become associated with what has been experienced at them. We see this law at work even among the lower animals. If a horse has had a fright at a particular place, it will begin to tremble as it comes to the locality. The widow, whose husband was killed at a particular turn of the road, cannot pass it without being overwhelmed with grief. The mother ever remembers her boy, now perhaps grown into a man, as she passes the place where she parted with him as he set out to face the hard struggle of life in some distant city or foreign land. Thus it is that certain localities suggest great historical events. Marathon and Bannockburn and Waterloo call up nations delivered from tyranny, and Bethlehem and Nazareth and Jerusalem call up freedom achieved by a mighty deliverer for the sin-enslaved race of mankind. Taking this key with us, we can often explain certain peculiarities of character which may seem very odd. The child screams when he hears of his being about to receive a visit from the surgeon who had to perform a painful operation on him. That boy will not taste the jelly piece offered him because the jelly is associated with the nausea of the drug which was administered in it. An excellent lady of my acquaintance was nearly killed by a bullock when a child, and ever since she runs from the most harmless cow as if it were a lion. Thus it is that certain persons have been made to acquire a horrid shrinking from certain objects, such as mice or rats, as frogs or toads, as cats or dogs, or from darkness, which is associated with ghosts. Beginning with these simpler instances, we can now explain more complex and recondite cases, as how people become prejudiced against certain persons. These persons have inflicted on them some real, or quite as possible, some imaginary injury, or against certain scenes, because there they have suffered a humiliation. I know a man who supposes that I kept him out of an office which he very much coveted, and ever since, when he is in danger of meeting me, he sets off the nearest byway that may enable him to escape. Those who have injured anyone in his property or good name are apt ever after to shrink from his company, for his presence reminds them of their sin, which they would rather keep out of sight. I knew a young man who made a fool of himself and was laughed at the first night he entered a debating club, and never after could he be made to face such a meeting, which he always looked upon as an array of bristling spears, the tongue of every member being ready to enter into his heart. Young persons are to be on their guard against falling under the power of such unreasonable or sinful associations. When we are in danger of being subjected to them, we should hasten to deliver ourselves from the thraldom by connecting the objects with other and more pleasing remembrances. I know a boy who in early life got a fright at dogs, and it was only by his being led to mingle for long with very gentle animals that he was cured of his terror. That is, dogs now became associated in his mind with harmlessness and playfulness. I am acquainted with a physician who, feeling how injurious it is to children to be in terror of their doctor, contrives to amuse his juvenile patients till he becomes a favorite. It is thus we should endeavor to overcome our antipathies towards all of whom we are jealous. Let us think of them under the more favorable aspects of their character, or if we cannot but know and abhor their bad qualities, let us at least ever remember that we ourselves are also sinners. It is thus we should contend against every sinful prejudice, against every prejudice, indeed, except the prejudice against sin, which we should certainly ever associate with loathing and detestation. End of section 13.